going to move on now to another really deep area, i.e. technology and enabling technologies. Now, frankly, this could be a conference in its own right. And there are so many different aspects of it. But what I wanted to get across is to really see growth, to see the introduction of new technologies to facilitate healthy aging, independent living at scale. It's very difficult to expect SMEs to innovate and do it alone. You've got the issues of interoperability that we've touched on, and you've got the fact that you've got security implications, and you've got the human factor. You've got the fact that people need to trust what they're buying into. So we decided that we would focus specifically on a large corporate that we feel gets it. And I'd like to introduce Robin Denton, who's the head of housing for Microsoft in the UK.
Hi, Ian. Thank you for having me. Thanks for the intro. So I'm Robin Denton. As Ian alludes, I actually have 3 hats on in Microsoft. Never simple in our organisation. I'm the head of housing for Microsoft UK. I am also the head of local and regional government in the south of the UK, so that's kind of the Birmingham region downwards. And I also look after a number of fire brigades in the region that I operate in. So actually, when we start talking about some of the themes that have come through today, it's a real pincer area for some of the work that we're doing in the marketplace. Because realistically, we start talking about communities and multi-generational living. Actually, we touch both housing associations in terms of how they're operating. We're working with local authorities who are obviously providing education and care into those communities, amongst many other services. And we also are working with fire and rescue organisations who are looking at how to safeguard and protect people in those areas. So there's a number of different areas where actually some of these conversations come together quite nicely. And I'll try and rattle through in just 10 minutes a few of the different thoughts that we've had and conversations we've had whilst working with Ian. Could we move the slide on, please? Fantastic, and just one, perfect, thank you. So I just want to start with a little bit of what we're doing in public sector UK here at Microsoft. So we're putting a lot of thought and effort into actually what does the journey look like as someone goes through life, and what does that mean from an experience perspective, from interacting with the numerous different agencies that organisations will be that citizens will be engaging with through that. And what are those experiences like? Because frankly, in the UK in particular, a lot of these experiences that we see people having and processes that they have to engage with, frankly, are from Victorian eras. You look at from the beginning of life. I'm a father to 2 young children myself. And I find it absolutely astounding that the way we interact with the health service for early years is through a red book that I have to remember where it is at all times, and I have to take to every type of checkup, rather than that being a digital record with an application on the front end that we can seamlessly engage with. And as you start going through that ongoing journey through life, there's lots of different experiences that people will have that are increasingly becoming digitized. I mean, if we look at the experience we are having at the moment with COVID, with lockdown, that is really apparent as you start thinking about how is education shifting and how people's work patterns having to shift to be able to support that. As we start thinking about what do communities deliver. So, I live just outside of Reading and I live in a very vibrant community. And I heard someone talking about this earlier on in terms of them having moved into a new build and the community they have there. But in terms of the way that we bring that community together to be able to support each other through COVID has really changed the way a lot of people are beginning to think about what digital means, in terms of saying, hey, we have people who are vulnerable in our community and we need to find a way of supporting them in the right way based on the needs that they have, again, tied very much to, where are they in their journey through life. So we start thinking about what those different touch points are. We start thinking about how those things start intercepting, and it's a bit of a misleading slide, this, because whilst we have it as almost a kind of linear journey, I think we all agree actually there's big circles that cross all through that journey. Could we move the slide on, please, and just move on to the next one? Fantastic. So as we start thinking about actually what does that mean, particularly when we start talking about how do we provide better support for the older members of society. I saw some of the conversation earlier, so I'm going to avoid the word elderly. But I find that actually the conversation that we're having really comes down to a couple of the points that were made earlier. We very much know that people want to live in their own home for as long as is humanly possible. And in order to do that, we've got to think about what is it that that individual needs to live in a home at that moment in time. And that varies through, going through life. And that will also vary based on whether you're able-bodied or whether you have some form of a disability, be that a physical disability that's temporary, be that a physical disability that's permanent. Whatever that scenario is, how is it that we best support that individual and make technology accessible and services accessible based on what that disability looks like? So we have to understand what is it that that individual needs at any given time. We need to start thinking about, what does a personalized experience for that individual look like? And who is it within the community and indeed the public sector, housing associations and the like, that need to start providing that? And that's why the concept of a smart multi-generational neighborhood is so interesting to us, because it gives us that pincer point where you can start saying, hey, look, we are very much focusing on how we bring generations together, how we bring the right type of services to the right person contextually, how we have people supporting each other. But what does the digital journey behind that looks like is one of the areas that we are very, very focused on at the moment. We're very keen on trying to help to find ways that people can find the right help that they need within their community. And indeed helping organisations, be they local authorities or others, to identify where there are potential black spots in care delivery and how we can help to fulfil those through the community. We're looking at, when you start thinking from a local authority or a healthcare angle, what is it that we need to enable staff to provide the right care to the right individual in their home and contextually to the needs that they have? So all of those things really are programs of work that we are looking at the moment. If you go on to the next slide, we've got a few examples of some of those. So some examples of just a few of the things that we're very much working on at the moment. There's a lot of complexity. I now have a cat jumping on me. The joys of working from home. We have a lot of complexity in terms of, what are the different services that are delivered now, and where do they come from, and how do we start joining those up? If you think about the different organisations across health, across local government, housing associations, charities, private sector organisations, there is a great deal of complexity there. And we're very much looking at actually how do we start bringing those different organisations together so that we focus on what is the care pathway and what is the support pathway that is needed for that particular individual. By bringing different sets of information together, I think Jeremy alluded to it very well, that data is really important in this conversation. So as we start thinking about how we bring different data sets that we might have around someone's health, around someone's someone's living conditions, around what's going on in their family experience, in their home, where we might be seeing health issues or addiction issues and what we need to do there. How is it we start bringing together those differing sets of information to get a rounded view of the citizen across the support services that are needed? How do we start building out a visual timeline of what that might look like across those services so that we can start understanding trends and start understanding how different support could actually help that individual in a different way sooner? But there is a lot of politics and complexity that is involved in that. And one of the biggest things we have to overcome is the concept of trust and the concept of security. So how is it we share information securely in a way that people will have trust in, and the way that is very clear and transparent to the individual as to how you are sharing that individual data and what the outcomes are that you are driving through sharing that data that benefits them and that benefits society. I think that is one of the key things that we're seeing at the moment in terms of breaking down some of the barriers we have between organizations in those data silos, is that concept of trust, that concept of security, and that concept of transparency. If you can move on to the next slide. This is a horrible slide, by the way, and you wouldn't expect a tech company necessarily to come up with without showing a horrible slide like this. But rather than going through the nuts and bolts, I'll talk about what we have here thematically. Realistically, what we're looking at the moment from an organizational perspective is what are those different touch points that you have out into society, and that could be how you're interacting with citizens. That's how you might be interacting with local businesses, how you might be interacting with other government departments. But one of the things that's really interesting in terms of when we're talking about multi-generational neighborhoods is actually how you start interacting with things like sensors to gather real-time data as to what is going on within that region. I think I heard earlier people talking about how footfall flows, how different public spaces are being used. That indeed flows into the home. Things like fall sensors, trip sensors, to detect whether or not someone's had a fall. Actually, we have a program in a hospital in London at the moment where on the wards they're putting fall sensors, they're putting trip sensors, they're putting heat and humidity sensors, so that they can have immediate alert if there is something that needs intervening with a patient whilst they're on the ward. And that stuff is equally applicable to how we create homes and spaces that are supportive for the individual who's living in that. I think the key to us is how is it we bring those different information sets, those different data sets together in a way that is very much transparent, secure, but actually you're able to drive meaningful outcomes from. And it's going along that journey that is really important. Now, when we talk about some of the work that we've been discussing with Ian, it's a really interesting conversation around actually how do we make that standardized. And that's why I think the concept of an ISO standard is just so important. Creating that consistent backbone that can be delivered across whatever technology platform it is really important, so we can understand what the inputs are, we can understand what the data sets are, how they are going to be used, how they're going to be secured, how they are going to be shared back down to that citizen for their well-being is absolutely critical. And how is it that actually across the globe, as we start seeing these projects spinning up and coming together, when something is created, that actually we're able to share and reuse that in a really consistent manner, in a way that actually you can start saying, hey, we have standards here that we know if we design to them and we design technology solutions around them, it doesn't matter where we want to land them. If people are building and putting in place the platforms that support those standards, that's really, really critical in terms of how we move this work forwards. And those very much are the conversations we're having at the moment. I'm conscious of time. I've had 11 minutes of speaking and Ian gave me 10. So I'll stop there for any questions that may have come up while I've been talking.
Well, you're very time conscious. I much appreciate that. Robin, what you covered in 10 minutes or 11 is tremendous. I have a question for you without wanting to put you on the spot, but
Means you're going to put me on the spot, right, Ian?
I won't put you on the spot. I won't, but I will say that, I've been engaged with Microsoft for 5 years now on this space and spoken to lots of people in very senior positions who have got it. But the challenge to create the kind of digital plumbing, the infrastructure piece, the heavy lifting, means that, as you and I know, because we've had some really interesting conversations, and with your team, your wider team, it means connecting the dots between silos of operation and silos of selling, because at the end of the day, you are like your competitors, huge corporations that have ways of doing business. It doesn't mean to say that you don't have corporate social responsibility. It doesn't mean to say that you can't see the wider social impact, but to do anything at scale, and we need scale, there needs to be a commercial driver. and getting that into a global corporate operation so that others are thinking along similar lines is a big challenge. So I know that within Microsoft, relatively recently in the past month or so, you've got a new health platform, which is quite radical for your sector. And actually that's got cut across different verticals. And I can see that playing an important part in terms of supporting digital health and social care. The question to you, therefore, is how do you think this kind of requirement, because it is a requirement, we need this in order to build properly enabling neighborhoods, multi-generation neighborhoods, to be, you know, we can do the aesthetic, we've heard about the design, we've got experts who buy into that, but you've got to connect the dots, and it's got to be something that is scalable. So I feel very strongly about this. What can we do, or do we have to wait for another 5 years?
No, I think the key to this is, how do you go about taking an idea and going after it and flowing through with that idea, and either creating a success from it quickly or learning and failing very fast from that and learning about what hasn't worked and what do we need to do differently. I think the thing that has changed over the last few years is, if you think about things historically, everything was about, how do I build this stuff in my own environment? How do I build it in my own data center? How do I create something that is packaged and then I sell to someone else and they have to go and spend a year, 18, 24 months implementing and delivering? What has changed so significantly over the last couple of years is the adoption of cloud-based technologies, where you're able to build something quickly, stand it up, take it down if it's not what you want, and if it is what you want, the capabilities through platforms like GitHub to take that and say, hey, I've got something here that's fantastic, I want to share it, I want other people to be able to use it and then build on it, and I will benefit from that continuation of building on it, is what's so important. But you've got to start somewhere. You've got to start with something and start somewhere, because otherwise you lose years talking about what it could be, as opposed to saying, do you know what, we could stand some stuff up pretty quickly. I mean, a great example of that is some of the work that we've done, slightly off piece theory, but we've done some great work with Coventry City Council recently, who are looking at how they use, big data to start understanding travel patterns and travel movements, and what they can do overlaying cell phone data on top of that, just to understand how the region's moving. They've stood that up in like 3 weeks. That's something that previously would have been a huge program of work. So I think when you start thinking about how we can do this stuff, it's about picking the right thing that we can build on together quickly. And we either go, hey, this is working, it's a program that definitely we can take forwards, or it's about learning from it. What didn't work, and if we're going to try and do something similar again, what would we change to do it differently?
If we take that model and apply it, let's say, to the Clarion prototype, pilot project, and let's say we've got that evidence, how easy is it for you to take that into the US, for example?
We feed everything back up into if you like, from Microsoft terminology, work in the UK, the mothership. Everything is catalogued, and actually we've got a very, very strong team who are able to say, hey, have you seen what they have done in this part of the world? How can we start thinking about what that might mean in a different region? And actually, I think the other thing we're getting far better at is connecting with individuals within Microsoft, so that actually on a global footprint, I'm well connected with my counterparts in Canada and America and Germany, making sure that we're getting together to cross-pollinate those ideas. So if I can learn something that's happening in housing or local government in Germany, actually I can bring that back down to what we want to do in the UK. In terms of the actual solutions itself, more technically, it's far simpler now, because everything is cloud-based, and it is a case of, hey, how do we help to connect these organizations to share some of that IP that they're doing?
Would you say that creating a standard, an ISO international standard, could help to move that whole process along?
Oh, absolutely, because then everyone is playing with the same rules of engagement, right? And everyone is building to the same consistent standard. Things like that are incredibly important in terms of tech delivery. Open standards, open source, sharing that information, sharing what's working, coming together and co-developing with other organizations who are delivering similar projects is vital. And it is the way the world is going. The more we can do in that space, the better.
We very much look forward to furthering the dialogue with you and colleagues. And thank you very much for your time today. Much appreciated.
Thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ian.